Today I want to deep dive a little bit into the topic of knowing yourself. And so knowing yourself really means acknowledging who you actually are. It is taking the time to learn about yourself. And most of us, when we say, hey, who are you? Or if somebody asks us, who are you? We don't often have a lot of things that we can really say. We might just refer to our roles. For example, myself, I'm a mom. I'm a business owner. I'm a coach. Those are things that I can say about my role, but they don't really tell you a whole lot about who am I at the core, because there's a lot more complexities to who I am than just those things. And if you take me with those three roles and you take another person who has those exact same roles, we are not the same person in any way, shape, or form. So there has to be more to knowing yourself than just your role. So this is where we want to start looking at, first of all, what are your limitations? I don't want to talk a lot about limitations because I want to try to keep this in a positive frame. Quite often when we talk about what are people's limitations, we are really good at giving this great big long list of, well, I'm not this and I'm not that. Really, those things don't actually matter that much. We need to acknowledge that maybe we're not good at some things. But we don't want to be acknowledging them from a place of judgment. It is what it is. I'm not good at some things, but I am really good at other things. And so that's going to be our bigger focus for today. When we think about our limitations, though, some things are things that, okay, I have these limits. How am I going to work around them? I may want to ask, how am I going to find people who can help me with those limits? How are people able to help me to overcome? Or are there things that other people can do on my behalf so that I can work around those limitations? And so when we're thinking about our limitations, this is something that I've really learned and I think is really important because it allows me to be okay with my limits. And when I started to realize that our limitations are actually opportunities to allow other people to let their strength shine. So I'm going to say that again. It's our limits are an opportunity for other people to shine. When we hide our limits, when we're pretending that we can do it all, when we pretend that we've got it all under control, we are limiting the opportunities for other people to show what they can do. So next time you're looking at yourself going, oh, but I can't, or I'm not good at, or I don't like this negative thing about myself, recognize that those things are okay. They are still a part of you, and they are an opportunity and a gift to others because it lets others shine. So we're going to shift now away from what our limits are. We're going to look at what are we good at? What are you good at? And so the first point I make here then is knowing your gifts and your talents. What are your abilities? What are you competent at? What are you good at? What are the things that you're able to do that maybe not a lot of other people are able to do? And so that's a really important part of knowing yourself. And then you want to know, what are your personal preferences? So it's okay for me to say, I like this, I don't like that. Knowing what you like, knowing what you don't like, they're not something that you need to put a lot of judgment on. Okay? For just a really simple basic example, if I like pineapple on my pizza, that's okay. Other people don't have to like it. I do. I don't have to be ashamed of it just because somebody else doesn't like it. And they don't need to be ashamed that they don't like it. So the reason I give really basic, simple analogies is because that way it can be relatable to just about anyone. So you can take that and you can relate that idea of, whether or not you like pineapple on your pizza to just about any area in your life. A small area that, I bring up sometimes in my own life is my son has recently started fishing. He loves to go fishing now. And so I know my preference is I don't want to touch the fish to take it off the hook. That's okay. So he's able to do it. He's willing to do it. I don't have to. And so we're all good. There's no judgment just because I don't want to do that one thing. I know myself. I know what I like. I know what I don't. And it's okay. The next part of knowing yourself is knowing what your personality, your temperament, and your character traits are. And so those things are very much interwoven, personality, temperament, and character. They're very similar, but they're also different. And so I just want to give just a little bit of brief information on how they're different. So first of all, personality, that is largely learned behavior. And that is mostly that stuff that we learn between the time that we're born up to roughly around 5 years old. And so for any of you that are parents, I want you to think about how are you helping to shape the personality of your children, especially in those formative years. But that is the part that we largely get from our parents in those years, and that's the personality part. Character is those traits that we choose for ourselves, and we say, okay, you know what, maybe I am not as humble as I should be. Okay, I'm going to work on that, and I'm going to develop that humility as a character trait. So that's something that we can choose to do. There are people who are naturally very humble, and that is great. And if you're not one of those people, that's okay, because you can choose to develop it. That's the character part. So, and then temperament, that is largely inborn. It is very static throughout the lifespan. It's born in you from the time that you are born. Those are character traits that they don't change because of our environment. They don't change because of the experiences that we've had in our lives. Character and personality can certainly change because of different experiences, but temperament is kind of static. And so understanding kind of what's that core part of your personality and your temperament and your character, those character traits or those temperament traits, those are things that are going to be with you throughout the lifespan. If you take a temperament test when you're young and you take one again when you're old, those things will come out more or less the same every time. And the reason that they change a little bit would be because of the small changes in your personality and your character traits. The next one is knowing your core values. So knowing what is important in your life. What do you value? And so that's a really important part as well of understanding yourself. Quite often our values are shaped through the different experiences that we've had in our lives. And so just taking some time to figure out what do I value? What is important to me? And then the next one is knowing your history, your family, your ethnicity, your culture, your traditions, what language you speak, what gender you are. These are things that are all going to impact the person that you are and shape who you become. So for example, the family that you come from, your family may or may not live life in the way your community at large might live. And so you may have some specific family traditions that maybe other families don't have. Or maybe you come from a cultural background where your culture is different than the larger culture around you. And so you also may have some different traditions because of your culture or your ethnic background, your experiences in life because of ethnicity, what language you speak. We know that language largely shapes how we think and how we view the world. Some languages will use a lot of feminine and masculine pronouns to describe different objects. And so you might have one language that might refer to one object with a feminine pronoun and another language that refers to that same object with a masculine pronoun. And they're going to perceive the world differently. And they're going to have different value systems based on how they perceive that world. And so that's just another piece to take into effect. And how have you become the person that you are? And when we look at family and ethnicity and our traditions and so forth, that historical piece, these are things that you cannot change where you come from. Those things are the way that they are. And so learning to just accept them as they are. Without judgment, we can be able to say, okay, you know what, I like this tradition, I don't like that tradition. Again, that goes into our preferences. You can choose for yourself what you're going to carry forward in your life and what you're going to leave behind. But just recognizing how those things have influenced your development and becoming who you are. And so when you get to the homework on those pieces, you'll notice that I have also included a couple of lists. I've given you a list of examples of different traits. So when you're looking at your personality and your character and your temperament, there's a list of traits there that you can use to kind of help guide you in thinking about the homework question on that. There's also a list of core values that you can take some time and you can look at the core values and say, okay, what are these things that are the most important to me? Just a couple of examples of core values might be things like some people really value honesty. Someone else might really value stability. And so in order for me to have a stable life, will it create opportunities or will it create situations where maybe I'm not going to be as honest as I should? And so that can also create conflict in our core values. And so recognizing sometimes we have different core values that might be competing for the number one spot. And so looking at this list, giving yourself some time to think about that, I think will be really valuable for you to understand, what are the things that are most important for you. Next area that I wanted to talk about today is this idea of self-image, and how this comes down to how do you view yourself? How we view ourselves is not the same as how other people see us. And it's okay to take some time and also say to your friends and your family, okay, how do you see me? Because that is also going to influence that's going to help us to determine whether or not we have an accurate self-image or not. And so your view of yourself, it might be a really positive view of yourself, or it might be a negative one. And so just recognizing that all of these things that we've just been talking about today are all contributing to how you see yourself. And if you don't like what you see when you look at yourself, if you don't like that self-image, then you are in control of your life and you have the opportunity to change it. If you don't like something that you're doing, if you don't like how you're handling certain situations, if you don't like how you behave in certain situations, you are the one that has the power to change that. And so recognizing that if you don't like something, change it. And maybe it's not changing the behavior, maybe it's not doing something different. Maybe it's just stopping and looking from another perspective. Or maybe you just need to let go of some of the judgment. So quite often when we are having a negative self-image issue, it's because we are judging ourselves. Probably more to do with your own judgment of yourself than it is about other people judging you. And so you can also set new expectations for yourself. So if I have set my expectations so high that they're not attainable, I'm always going to be miserable because I can never ever reach that expectation. And sometimes we need to change where we set that bar. Maybe sometimes we need to bring that a little bit lower so that it's more realistic in our expectations of ourselves. If we're expecting perfection all the time, we will never, ever, ever attain it. If we can say, okay, it is okay to not be perfect, and that this is okay and this is good, then we are more free to love ourselves. And so just a couple of little takeaways for today is recognizing that there is and never has been another you. You are the only you that ever will and ever can be you. You are, as I said earlier, you are created in the image of God, which means you're an image bearer. Right? And so whatever your view is of God, and we recognize that as human beings, we bear that image, we need to live a life that matches that. Right? And we need to recognize that this image of God is inside of us. And if God is awesome, then we are awesome too. Right? We may not be as awesome as God. Well, we actually are not as awesome as God, but we have this little bit of awesome in us, and we can find that awesome, and we can respect that awesome, and we love that awesome, and we can share that awesome with others. And so thinking about this idea that you were knit together in your mother's womb. God sees you as so valuable. He has even taken the time to know the number of hairs on the top of your head. And if God knows you that well, He also wants you to take the time to know yourself. He wants you to know that you are wonderful and special and awesome. And so that's the takeaway for today, is take the time, know who you are, because this will become the first step in creating that foundation of resilience that's going to let you stand up into the storms that come in life.